There's a pot in a museum in England that hasn't been scrubbed clean in 400 years. Same family, same fire. It just never went cold. Meanwhile, you've got $40 of food in your fridge and somehow nothing to eat tonight. 15 meals, one pot each, most under $3 to make today. And the last one is a kitchen trick that stumped European doctors for 200 years, while the people who invented it never got sick from it once. 1. The perpetual pottage. This is basically the parent of everything else on this list. Medieval peasants kept one pot going over the hearth around the clock. Barley, oats, peas, whatever was green in the garden that week. Ladle some out for dinner, drop more in before bed. The pot never went cold, never got washed, and honestly, never really needed to be. Sounds unsanitary. It's the opposite. A pot kept near a boil for years is one of the worst places on earth for anything to grow. What actually gets people sick is a pot that cools all the way down and just sits there for hours before it gets reheated. Your slow cooker on the counter is just a plastic version of a hook over a fire, and a much lazier one at that. 2. Papa al pomodoro. Tuscan bread is baked with no salt, so it goes hard within a day. That was never a problem, that was the entire plan. Tear it into a pot with crushed tomatoes, a smashed garlic clove, some oil, enough water to loosen it. 20 minutes later, the bread's completely gone, dissolved into the tomatoes, and what's left is thick enough that a spoon stands up in it on its own. Costs about $1 to throw together at home. Florence will sell you the exact same bowl for 15 euros, with a basil leaf on top, so you don't ask too many questions about it. 3. Congee. China solved. There's barely any rice left in the house. About 2,000 years ago. 1 cup of rice, 10 cups of water, and time on your side. The grains break down completely until the whole pot turns silky and white, and 1 small handful of rice suddenly stretches to feed 4 people. Here's how you know it actually works. It's what you're handed when you're sick. What a baby eats first. What someone with no teeth left can still get down without a fight. Half the rice-growing world landed on this same fix independently, which usually means an idea was too obvious to miss twice. 4. Khichdi. India threw rice and lentils into one pot and accidentally solved something nutritionists didn't get around to explaining until the 1900s. Rice on its own is missing a couple of amino acids. Lentils happen to cover exactly those. Cook them soft together with turmeric and salt, and 2 cheap dry pantry staples turn into a complete protein sitting in one bowl. Nobody cooking this centuries ago had a chart in front of them. They just noticed people recovering from illness got their strength back faster on it, wrote nothing down, and kept making it anyway. 2 sailors gave us the next 2 meals on this list. One of them accidentally named an entire English city in the process. 5. Caul. Wales. Lamb or bacon, leeks, swede, carrot, potato, all in one pot over the fire. Here's the part almost nobody bothers with anymore. You don't eat it the same day you make it. You cook it, leave it out overnight somewhere cold, skim the hard fat cap off the top the next morning, and only then do you eat it. Cleaner taste, less grease sitting on your tongue, and the fat you skimmed off gets kept back for frying something else entirely. Broth and bread first, as its own course. Meat and vegetables after. One pot quietly doing the job of 2 separate meals. 6. Scarce. Norwegian sailors brought a cheap stew called lapskaus into Liverpool, a working port town, and it simply never left. Locals shortened the name down to scouse. Then the dish got so common that people from Liverpool started getting called Scousers because of it. Today, the entire accent spoken there is called Scouse, a whole regional identity traced back to one pot of meat and potatoes cooked on a dockside stove. Lamb or beef, onion, potato, carrot, water, salt, simmered until the potato dissolves and thickens everything by itself. No meat in the house that week? You called it blind scouse and carried on with your evening. 7. Urten soup. The Dutch built a soup with a built-in pass or fail test baked right into it. Split peas, pork, celeriac, leek, carrot, cooked until the peas vanish completely into the broth. It sits overnight, thickens further, and the next morning you stand a spoon straight up in the middle of the pot. Stays standing on its own, you made proper snert. Falls over sideways, you made soup. And someone's Oma will happily point that out to your face. They sold it straight out of pots at the edge of frozen canals in winter, thick enough to keep a person warm on skates for hours at a time. 8. Bigos. Poland found the one stew on earth that somehow gets better the worse you treat it. Sauerkraut, fresh cabbage, whatever meat happened to be around, dried mushrooms, sometimes a handful of prunes thrown in for good measure. Cook it, let it go completely cold, cook it again the next day. Some households ran this cycle for a full week without stopping. Every reheat breaks the cabbage down a little further and pushes the flavor deeper into the meat sitting underneath it. Hunting parties made one huge batch, left it sitting in the freezing air between meals, and reheated it in the field for days on end. Doing basically nothing to it is the entire technique here. 9. Goulash. Everything you picture the second you hear the word goulash is from centuries after the dish actually started out. Goulias just means herdsman. Hungarian cattle herders cooked this in a kettle called a bograx, out on the open plains, and originally it was thin and soupy, just beef and onion and nothing else. Paprika only shows up much later, once peppers finally reached Hungary and someone figured out how to dry them properly. The onion does more work here than the beef ever does. Cooked down low and slow for long enough, it melts and thickens the entire broth completely on its own, with no flour anywhere near the pot. One more before the halfway point, and this next one was built to serve 3 separate courses off a single fire. 10. Cocido, Spain, and maybe the single most efficient dish on this entire list. Chickpeas, pork, a bone, some chicken, cabbage, potato, all going together in one pot for hours on end. Served in 3 separate rounds. Broth with thin noodles dropped in first. Chickpeas and vegetables second. Meat carved onto its own plate, saved for last. One fire, 1 sack of cheap chickpeas, and a family with almost nothing could put a spread on the table that looked like they were hosting a wedding. 11. Borscht. Everyone gives the credit to the beets. Almost nobody talks about the sour, and the sour is really the whole point of the dish. Real borscht needs acid, and traditionally that came from fermented beet juice left going in a jar down in the cellar for weeks. That's where both the deep red color and the sharp bite actually come from. Most modern versions just cheat with a splash of vinegar instead and call it close enough. Beets, cabbage, potato, whatever meat was around. Sour cream stirred through right at the end. Keeps for days in the cold, and that sourness is a big part of why it lasts that long. 12. Cassoulet. France took white beans, a bit of pork, and a bird too old to keep laying eggs, and cooked the whole thing low in clay for most of a day. The step almost everyone skips today is the crust. As it bakes, a skin forms across the top, and you're meant to break it open and push it back down under the surface. Some households did this 7 separate times over one long cook. Every crust folded back in thickens the whole pot just a little more each time. Now it's a fancy restaurant plate with entire towns arguing over who invented it first. It started as nothing more than a way to use up beans before they went stale. 13. Feijoada. Brazil's black bean and pork stew, and the story most people repeat about it doesn't quite hold up once you dig into it. The popular version claims enslaved people invented it purely from scraps thrown out by owners. Historians have pushed back on that pretty hard over the years. Bean and pork stews already existed across Portugal and much of Europe, and those same cheap cuts were exactly what poor people everywhere on the continent were already eating. What's actually true is the method itself: black beans, salted pork, garlic, bay leaf, cooked slow until the broth turns almost black and glossy on top, served over rice with orange slices on the side, because the acid in the orange cuts straight through all that fat. 14. Hoppin' John. Black-eyed peas and rice cooked down with a smoked ham hock, straight out of the Carolinas. The pea itself traveled over from West Africa on slave ships, and this dish sits right at the root of a huge stretch of southern cooking today. People still eat it every New Year's Day for luck, the peas standing in for coins in the pot. Dried peas, a cup of rice, one cheap smoked bone. That combination fed a family for 5 straight days, and it still costs you under $4 to make right now. 15. Pozole. Last one on the list, and here's the chemistry trick I promised you at the start. Mesoamerican cooks boiled dried corn in water, mixed with wood ash or lime, before ever cooking it into anything else. That one extra step is called nixtamalization, and it unlocks niacin sitting inside the corn that the human body otherwise can't absorb at all, no matter how much of it you eat. Europe took corn home without carrying that ash step along with it, ate corn-heavy diets for generations straight, and got hit with a disease called pellagra for roughly 200 years. Doctors at the time blamed bad air, bad blood, bad luck. Anything except the real answer sitting right in front of them. The people who'd been growing corn the longest had already solved this problem centuries earlier. Nobody thought to ask them how. Their version of the pot was hominy, pork, chili, broth, 3,000 years old, and nutritionally airtight the entire time. Same story running through every meal on this list. Barely any money, barely any fuel, one pot on the fire, and people who still expected something worth eating out of it by nightfall. Pick one and actually cook it this week. Tell me which one you're trying in the comments, and if you want the storage tricks that kept these ingredients from spoiling before they even made it into the pot, that's the next one.